Finally, it happened to me. I'm unemployed.
Hey guys, it's Tom Monda. Welcome to another episode of Unemployed, my quarantine interview segment. Right here today, I'm really honored to have, TV star of Grumps TV, a 2 times a week special, an incredible jazz guitarist, incredible performer, incredible educator, Bruce Forman. And this is where I'll put in the applause, so we feel like there. Yeah. So if you want to bow or just look like you're flattered, at least there'll be an applause there. Yeah. So Bruce, a lot of people who listen to my music maybe might not be familiar with what you do, even though you're kind of a legend in your field. So like maybe if you had to give someone the quick and dirty of the Bruce Forman story, what would it go like?
Well, maybe the whole thing is I didn't really spend a whole lot of time living on the East Coast. I go back there and work, but maybe that's why I'm kind of off technically the covers of Jazz Times and Downbeat and out of people's minds. I'm a bebop guitar player. I grew up in San Francisco, played with lots of guys, played with Bobby Hutcherson and Richie Cole and Eddie Jefferson and Freddie Hubbard and Ray Brown and lots of other cats too. Those were my early band years of touring. Mm-hmm. Played around locally in San Francisco. Always dug sharing the music with people, so the teaching thing as it exploded just was a natural for me. I started a music workshop for kids, so I learned how to run a nonprofit and stuff, and it was very successful. It was called Jazz Masters Workshop. I write novels. I'm a cowboy. I can train start horses and rope cows. Then I started a band called Cowbop, which pissed everybody off because I sort of mixed cowboy and jazz. It was like a Western swing meets Bird and Diz, really, mm-hmm. kind of. And
the Cowbop stuff is streaming, correct? For anybody who wants to check that out,
That's on my YouTube channel.
Awesome.
It's everywhere. There's CDs out. To my surprise, it got kind of popular in a weird way, and we still work gigs. Well, we had some that were scheduled until the pandemic came along and crushed them. I also have a project called The Red Guitar, which is where I recite a story and play at the same time. I was really lucky. I was brought up by mentors that really challenged me to always do my thing, whatever that was. It could have been harmonic, it could have been melodic, it could have been, a band, it could have been whatever. Just bring your thing and bring the music forward. That was always guys like Bobby Hutcherson, a drummer named Donald Bailey, a piano player named Smith Dobson. They were always very much don't do what we do. And that always bothered me when they said it, because it made me feel like I wasn't qualified to do what they do. But they really just meant, and they would always say, no, you're already doing what we do.
Yeah.
We want you to,
They were pushing you to find yourself, I guess, in a
right. And, and it's like, it's not always in a pedal. It's not always in a guitar. Sometimes it's just the situation you put yourself in. Sometimes it's the way you present it. And I was always around guys who were great entertainers along with being great musicians, and I always liked that. I do stand-up comedy and stuff. So, I mean, to me, it's just sort of putting it all together. And the older I get, the more I have to, because I have less time left. So I just kind of want to make everything part of everything. And my Grumps TV show is just, well, I got locked in the house just like everybody else did. My is a great singer and performer. So it was like, okay, let's do like a I Love Lucy meets Fernwood Tonight, as with where I'm the band, basically.
Yeah.
And we started it, and we realized we had fun, and I don't know how many people watch it. I really don't care. I'm doing it for me, although I do think that it possibly could be the next, night show on. I think there's enough people who want to see real shit and not
for sure
contrived. And everybody, I mean, we don't talk about politics much because it's hard to get away from it, you know, basically. Not that I don't have opinions. I just,
of course,
voice on everybody.
And and sometimes being a musician, I mean, even a musician on a small level like myself, sort of people don't like it when you have opinions really about politics as an entertainer. They think like you're overstepping your boundaries, forgetting like sort of the human side of you as a person who has to live in society, right? As someone who entertains them, sometimes people resent, seeing their artists sort of take that step.
Especially when they don't agree with them.
Totally. Yeah, of course.
And I mean, that's like kind of, and then therein lies the whole conundrum is like, the more you express it, when you've got 10 fans, do you really want to alienate 3 of them? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but you can't go against your principles either, because that's all wrapped up in your music. You have to, you can't get to do something you don't believe in any more than you can be someone you don't believe in. Yeah. So that's a real challenge. I mean, I'm lucky. I just point out the comedy of everything, and my thing is irony. One of my segments on the show is called Chronic or Ironic, and I bring up shit, and of course everything is both.
Yeah.
One or the other.
It can't not be. So now the Grumps character, I sort of like, I wonder if it's kind of like a Larry David thing with you, where Larry David says his character on Curb Your Enthusiasm is like what he wants to be, an exaggeration of sort of him. Would you categorize Grumps as that, or?
Yes, but it's far. I mean, Larry David is really an asshole. Yeah. Grumps is basically is a nice guy trying to be an asshole. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a complete, but I guess you could say, I mean, Grumps is kind of who I am, but who I want to be. Grumps can say shit that I wouldn't probably say.
Yeah. Would you say Grumps was influenced by like some of the guys that maybe the older guys that you were playing with when you were coming up in that sort of kind of zone?
Grumps, the genesis of Grumps was, this is probably about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine was visiting, hanging out at the house, and I was just ranting about Facebook. Mm-hmm. Not about Facebook itself, but the people on Facebook, people. And so it just like, he says, "I got to cut. You got to do it. You got to do something." So you
complained about Facebook, and it became a Twilight Zone episode where that's musicians' only audience, right?
Right. And so what I did was, he said, "Just play a little bit, and then say something like just rant." And so let's just see what happens. So I kind of played like 4 bars of blues, whatever, and then I ran on, and I said, and just the first word out of my mouth was like Grumps here. And I never thought of that word before. I just said it. Grumps here. I'm pulling out the geezer card, And then I said, when I was coming up, we practiced in private and we played in public. Mm-hmm. So remember that when you go Facebooking. And then I said, I think, and the next sound you're going to not hear is me playing a Wes Montgomery transcription.
So did this come from a zone?
That just came out. It,
came out. Yeah.
You can see on my YouTube channel.
And as a professor of music, that's a valid, And
it came up, and people just started calling me Grump. It was like an accident. I never believed in nicknames that people give themselves, but in a weird way, I didn't give myself that. It just sort of popped out.
Yeah.
And then there were subsequent rant videos that every time that guy came down to hang at that place and we'd play, you got to do another Grump. So I would think of something that pissed me off, like maybe tuners on headstocks. That's another one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, one of my friends described those as like the Bluetooth device of guitars, like when people wear those, you're leaving those.
Yeah, I mean, I just like aesthetically, I have a real revulsion. I mean, you know, I love the guitar aesthetically, the way it sounds, the way guys play it, and it's just, you know, and the headstock itself is like an identifier of who made it, and it's a beautiful aesthetic part of the instrument. And then to stick some crap ass piece of plastic on the end of it. No, I use them. Yeah. I mean, all the time. I mean, they're.
I just lost my snark endorsement, Bruce. Thank you.
No. I think I'm on. Thank the Lord. It's one of the best inventions, I think, of the 20th century. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, you were too young, but I remember when we didn't have those things and how bad music sounded. Really, those single-handedly helped the world of guitar playing.
Yeah.
In way, I mean, so I'm a big fan of those. I love those things. I wouldn't be caught dead without one, but I don't leave it on when I perform in public. Just like I'm a big fan of practicing. Yeah. I just don't do it in public.
Now you have a knack for like explaining some pretty deep concepts in very simple terms. So for people who maybe don't play jazz and you're saying, you know, don't practice in public, could you explain to them like the implication behind that?
Okay, well, where's your mind? When your mindset is in practice, you're working on things. You're developing options, basically, right? You're working on whatever harmonic concept, melodic concept, technical thing, whatever, you know, I mean, that's what practice is. You're learning something, you know, both you're learning it to understand it. You're also teaching your hands to be able to do it. There's all these elements of practice. Yeah. Developing options is what I kind of call it. But when you go to play, you're making choices. You're not working on developing options. So the things that, you know, of course, when you're practicing, you're working on your tone, you know, your sound production and your touch and your time. I mean, that's all part of it. But when you play, that is what is the important thing is. That's where the priorities shift. And playing in context in the moment, you know, and using your imagination and those kinds of things. You taking what you have practiced and putting it into music. And so that's where I define the different mindsets. And basically, if you're thinking really while you're playing rather than hearing, you probably are practicing. Yeah. You know, I mean, and we have these things like we just learn something we force ourselves to play it so that we know it. You're really kind of practicing in public there. But, you know, if you do it strategically and quickly, you know, it can not have a negative effect on the music.
Yeah. And I guess having blinders on and focusing on something conceptual when you're playing could also like short circuit your reactivity to things that other people are playing around you, which is
very much that. But you know, another thing it short circuits that we don't realize is it short circuits our ability to interact with ourselves. Like, let's say I'm playing a solo concert. Yeah. If I'm really like on some idea here, and there's some great idea that's ready to spring out of that, I'm not aware of it if I'm closing off that side. So, and is it really that important that I do it right, or is it important that I'm in the moment and making music? I don't know. My priorities are definitely more on the side of being in the moment, making music, playing in context, being imaginative. Those are far higher priorities to me than just nailing a 251 or you know, putting this particular harmonic device in at a given time. Yeah. You know, that's just my opinion. That's kind of what I mean. You know, and practicing in public, I'm really anti-transcription, dude. And believe me, you've heard my playing. You know,
you have tons of language. Yeah.
I'm not saying transcription's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying putting it on and playing along with it is just masturbating in public. It's ugly. It's disrespectful to the person who played it first.
Mm-hmm.
If it's such a great solo, how about just putting that solo up and letting everybody hear it instead of having to hear you slog through it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and no matter how good you do it, I mean, you should be doing it your way, but you're getting in the way of their doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, what's the point of this other than to show off or compete with your friends? There's no musical point to that. I don't get it. You know, meanwhile, that guy made it up and you're just copying it and he's still playing it better than you. That's pretty embarrassing right off the bat, you know?
You know, I heard John Scofield in an interview was talking about how he hears people play licks that have his mistakes. Like they might have learned like a lick off the record that he didn't play perfectly. And it becomes part of the vernacular when people
believe me, you know, but that's true of, you know, to take it one step further, he's done that too.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I would say that of my things that I really know that I brought to the music, I mean, there are some certain things and I do hear other people play them.
Uh-huh.
But I play them a lot too. And the genesis of those ideas were mistakes, almost in every case. I meant to do something, ended up doing something else, and I heard it and dug what it sounded like, kind of cataloged in my mind, oh, you know, go home and work that out, find out what that is. And because it's a mistake, it was only a mistake because you meant to play one thing and you played that instead. It's not a mistake because it sounded bad.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes maybe the reason why mistakes can sound so fresh, I guess, is because you're subverting the expectations in some way. Which, when you're subverting your own expectations, you know, you're so used to hearing yourself. When you hear yourself in a context that you're not used to, suddenly, something fresh. And maybe it doesn't have to be something that has some kind of profound concept behind it, other than spontaneity, which is something that I feel like you might lose learning a transcription. You lose that sort of fact that it was an in the moment kind of thing, and you're taking something, you know, that was totally expressive, right, and boiling it down to more pedagogical kind of way. You tend to lose that for sure.
I would totally agree. I mean, all you got to do is listen to all those derivative guys of Charlie Parker, guys coming out of college playing Charlie Parker licks, and then really listen to Bird. And I mean, the difference is so striking, not just on a sonic level or a playing level, but on an emotional level.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just like, holy shit, you know, whoa, you know, I forgot what was really in the soup there. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Like when I remember, you know, I didn't instantly, you know, I got Charlie Parker, but you know, I came from an opposite direction where it took me a while to sort of get into it. You know what I mean? I had to like develop more as a musician to understand. And I remember the day I heard, some people might hate on this record, but the Charlie Parker with strings record is some of the most beautiful soloing I've probably ever heard. And that was just like one for me that once it clicked with me, what was happening in the music and just how deep it was. And sort of all the encumbrances of kind of learning music in school in terms of these like intellectual encumbrances kind of just fell off when you hear like a real master play that. And just it's kind of a cool thing, you know. Hard to explain thing, but
more than cool. It's like, I mean, I just got to tell you, wow, you know. I mean, and I agree. I mean, that solo on Just Friends.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, it's just like, I don't think there's a better recorded improvisation on earth. Yeah, definitely. You know, and again, he played really different there than he. I mean, he's still Bird, but he didn't play the same way he played with the rhythm section. There was a whole...
Totally, yeah. He plays a lot of off-the-grid stuff in that. He's like a little more expressionist on that record.
Right, because he was playing orchestrally, you know, and there's a guy who let his surroundings define how he was going to create. And that's kind of our job. And I think, you know, hopefully during this unemployment period, as you call it, or the pandemic period, I call it the mandemic because my wife is now all of a sudden around me 24/7.
Yeah, I tell my girlfriend this is payback for all those times I went on tour and she had the house to herself. Now she's got to deal with me 24/7.
Right. You know what I mean? So the mandemic, I call it. So, you know, but that's like, here we are by ourselves now. So like to really dig into the solos, and we're lucky we were guitar players, but any instrument can do it. There's not an instrument that doesn't function beautifully as a solo instrument. To get inside where the instrument could go and provide more elements and more textures and kind of juxtaposition of those things, you know, and using simplicity against, you know, intricacy against density again, you know, I mean, these are things that we should have been exploring all along, but probably were too busy to, because we were just playing our parts in bands and, you know, just keeping up with things.
Yeah, totally. So like that brings me to an interesting question. If we were on an alternate timeline and young Bruce Forman was coming up, you know, you're starting your professional career and something like this happens, did you ever think about like kind of how that would affect you, or maybe what advice you would give to students who are like just kind of starting their music career amidst all this craziness in the world right now?
Well, I am doing that. I'm giving advice. And first of all, while I can't have complete empathy because I'm older and I've had all those years of experience, even before this, there was still a huge difference in my experience and what those kids have. You know, they have school, so that's their world. I had gigs with older guys. It was a generational scene. It was an economic scene. You know, not every gig was like a jazz gig where people were like there to hear jazz. Some gigs were just like background gigs.
Wallpaper kind of gigs, yeah.
You know, so some gigs were blues gigs. Some gigs were, you know, organ trios gigs. There were, you know, there was weddings, there was salsa gigs. I mean, I got to play in and there was lots of places to play. So I got to not only play all those styles and get a lot of time playing with a lot of different people, but I also got to play with a lot of older guys who really had a lot of shit happen. That, of course, kids don't really have now, because the older guys aren't playing as much, therefore there's not as much. And when we do play, we're not really interested in, like, I was playing 5 hours on a gig, you know, and 5-6 nights a week, and then probably sometimes 2 gigs a night, you know. So by the time the third set comes along, if somebody wants to sit in, you know, everybody's like, cool, come bring some new energy to this, you know. And it was this amazing thing where you could go play 5-hour gig and then go down somewhere and sit in somewhere, you know. And it's like, so that kind of just playing and hanging really created the styles of music that I came up in. We have moved past that. Not in that world anymore. We're in the world where a band rehearses and gets their shit together and plays 1 or 2 sets, you know, every 2 or 3 weeks practically.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
And so the music has changed because of that. And while I personally, you know, now I'll go Grumps and say I don't dig the direction it's taken, and I don't dig the prioritization of certain things over others. I respect it, and it's great music, and I go out and support it, and I listen to it all the time. Or I did.
Are you referring to the over-intellectualization of it?
I think the over-intellectualization or the over-technicalization of it, the lack of real group development, like everybody gets together and reads hard music, basically. I mean, the average modern jazz band played by kids, there's 3 defining qualities. 1 is it's hard to play. 2, it's hard to hear. I mean, I've got good ears. I can hear harmony. You know, I'm the guy you can put in a song and I can play it right away. That shit is hard for me to hear. I can hear it mostly, but I'm not all, you know what I mean? It's hard. It's work.
Yeah.
And the 3rd defining quality that I find universal, ubiquitous, is music stands. What is that telling me? Well, their priority is for being able to play your software. That is happening. You know, the extension of the musical ability and virtuosity has gone, you know, it's great. It's wonderful. It's amazing. That people are really into hard shit, hard to hear shit. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's where it's gone. Whatever. The music stand thing, well, that's telling me that people don't want to take enough time to learn their music, or don't have enough time to learn their music, which means the guys haven't been playing together to develop a cohesive way of interacting with each other like we did. we weren't playing shit that was as complicated as that, but we were playing a lot together. So we could anticipate what everybody would do and react to each other. And that was more the difficulty factor of we did. It wasn't synthesized in the music itself. It became an organic factor of just playing together.
Yeah, like when you play enough gigs with someone like a bass player and you go to an ending, they know what you're going to do because you've played with them so many.
Or they know to anticipate you're going to do something, and they'll wait for that nanosecond to give you the freedom to, like, okay, here we're going left. Okay, it's like, and so and believe me, that's just as hard as playing difficult changes. Don't get me, people always kind of, like when bebop came along, of course it upped the game technically for jazz from swing, but it was harder on one level. Swing was just as hard on another level, just being able to put it right in the pocket and play melodically and expressively in the confines of that. That was just as difficult. It was just a different kind of difficulty. And you'll take guys that can play the shit out of the guitar and you try and slow them down and get them to swing a chorus of the blues. They can't do it. And you get a bunch of guys that can swing a chorus of the blues. They can't play a bunch of that crazy. I mean, it's like there are all difficulty factors here.
Yeah.
I mean, but my point is yes, but I think because we're not playing as much together and because there's not as much of an audience interacting with us, we kind of are going down a road of more like the modern classical composer, where we live in our own soundscape and we put this together and then we just bring it out to the world, as opposed to something that's like an organism that's sort of being built by all the musicians contemporaneously.
Yeah, I think that maybe a byproduct of that issue is just when you have an audience that's mostly people who play the music, you don't have to really serve the I don't want to say the layman, but I listened to an interview with Bill Evans where he kind of says that he always has the layman in mind when he's making a song. And this is coming from someone as deep as Bill Evans, who plays some of those incredible harmony. But it was interesting for me to hear him say that he is considering the person who doesn't play jazz when he plays jazz, and maybe that's a consideration that has sort of shifted the mentality of the music in a certain way. I mean, you've been around the block a lot more, so.
Most definitely. And I mean, when I go hear the kind of music I'm talking about, it's generally the people who play it are in the audience. There's some jazz fans, but it's more than we're the ones that are supporting. And it's kind of not a very strong economy because, look, if I give you $20 to do your laundry, and then the next week you give me $20 to do my laundry, that's not really an economy. It's a circular sort of, the $20 just keeps passing back and forth. And there's some people, that music is amazing. It's great. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't really choose to play it that much. But I go check it out and I'm totally amazed by it. And I recognize that I have my aesthetic things that I like, and everybody does. Some people like thrillers, some people like musicals, some people like westerns, some people, it's like, it's great, whatever, I mean.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, we're all human, and there should be the human element in everything. And I like playing music with people, and I like playing music for people. And I came up with acts like Richie Cole, Eddie Jefferson, Bobby Hutcherson, Freddie Hubbard, Ray Brown. These are all entertainers along with being musicians. Don't fool yourself. They're all like get on the mic and tell a joke. They know how to read an audience. You know what I mean? And still keeping their integrity completely 100% intact. I work with Dizzy Gillespie, another one. They keep their integrity 100% intact musically, but they'd present the music the way they wanted, and they were having fun, and they wanted everybody to have fun.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's a big part of it too. Sometimes it's like sort of a tucked in shirt kind of vibe in some.
No. In many ways, I have felt since the late 80s, 90s, that approach to jazz is considered almost minstrelsy now.
Huh.
There's like there was like, and I hate to, I mean, a guy who I really respect, Wynton Marsalis, kind of ushered that in his early days. He's completely changed now. I mean, if you looked at Wynton in the late 80s, and the way he talked about music and what it had to be like, and with the way he's presenting it now at Lincoln Center, those two people are not the same person. I mean, Wynton is inclusive. He's having fun. He's lighthearted about it. He's open-minded about it. That was not the Wynton back then. And Wynton was like given the throne of the next Miles Davis, So jazz just immediately at that time, in my feeling, went like serious and dark. And here I'd played with Dizzy and Richie and Bobby and Freddie, and these guys were like clowning around in a certain way. I mean, they were playing, but like the way they presented the music, how enthusiastic they were about it, how much they loved it. That all was like exuberant. Exuberant is a better word than clowning. Although they did fuck around a lot and tell jokes and shit. And so I think Cowbop, my band, was sort of a knee-jerk reaction against that.
Yeah.
Feeling like, wait a minute, you guys are taking my music away from me. I've been playing, I mean, I was playing this music probably as early as Wynton was. I know he started younger, but I'm older than he is. So, like, don't tell me how to play this music. I've apprenticed to enough guys, and I love it as much as anybody. And I feel that I belong in the family, and so I'll define what it means to me. And, I don't think, I mean, Fats Waller was jazz to me, still is. Art Tatum is jazz to me. Those guys, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, those guys were entertainers too.
Totally. I just watched an interview with, I think it was Duke Ellington, maybe on Johnny Carson or something like that. And he is such a character, man. Just he's, yeah.
And and their music represented who they were, and Bill Evans is the same way. An introspective, highly intellectual, highly emotional person. Yeah. Who, people, you would think of him as an introvert and like he wasn't that. He was a warm, soulful person. I met him, I got to hang out with him. Talked to like Joe LaBarbera, who was on the road with him at the end. Bill, we people want to think of him as this hunched over piano player, totally introverted, not in the world. No, he was brilliant. He was very well aware of the world, around him. And his playing reflected that. Joe Henderson, the most quiet, soft-spoken, slow-moving guy. And yet look at his playing. He's like maybe the most intelligent player ever.
Yeah.
But if you sat and hung with him, which I did and work with him, he takes a while to say what he's going to say when he speaks. But boy, there's so much depth in there. So much, not just intelligence, but feeling, depth of emotion.
Yeah.
Feeling. And if you just kind of observed him, you would probably have a completely different idea. And if you listen to his music on a superficial level, you would have a different idea than if you really listen to his music about what's happening there.
Interesting. So, you're mentioning a bunch of these incredible players that you had an opportunity to play with when you were coming up, Bobby Hutchinson, like, Freddie Hubbard, all these guys that like are records I listen to all the time. What were some kind of nuggets of wisdom that you pulled from those experiences? Now, was it some things that they might have said to you, or things that you realized about yourself in those kind of scenarios early on?
I was talking to Stryker, and I played with MacDuff too for a little while.
Stryker has a lot of funny MacDuff stories.
Yeah, I know, and I know how like MacDuff would kind of be more direct, than the average guy. Of course, if you fucked up, I mean, they were on you. I mean, on the bandstand, they wouldn't wait till like to get in the back room. They would let you have it right then. You made sure that only happened once in your life. I mean, if you're, it's just everybody's got one of those stories, and if they've got two, they probably aren't playing anymore. What I mean? But mostly, it was by example. I mean, especially with that generation, like I'm the first generation where we actually talk about what we do.
Yeah.
Like those guys that I hung out with, most of the, if you guys, I mean, if you went to Bobby and said, man, that thing you play over, Little B's poem where you're playing, it's B minor, but sounds to me like, you're playing a diminished chord there. What's going on? And if I'd have said that, he'd go, just listen. He doesn't want. He wouldn't really talk about it too much. Occasionally we'd get into discussions about music, but it was never his own thing. He'd be talking about other people.
Mm. In terms of theory, or in terms of just like broader kind of
everything.
Everything.
From function to theory to to approach to background, whatever. But my point is it's all laid out there for you, and you can't really separate the man from the music or the woman from the music. It's just their personality and their way of playing and their physical way of being and their way of talking to you. It all, you can't really separate those things. So, nuggets of wisdom, things that I learned, and I learned this probably before I even played with any of them, because I was this kid we had this great club in San Francisco called Keystone Corner, and bands would play there 6 nights a week, Tuesday through Sunday. And 2 sets a night, sometimes 3, usually 2, 3 on the weekend.
All jazz, or did you have to do like a top 40 kind of thing in the beginning?
Oh, no, this was a club I went to.
Okay. Oh, so all
playing,
gotcha.
And I was just a kid going there checking it out. And I mean, 1 week would be Ross on Roland Kirk, then it would be Bobby Hutcherson, then it would be Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, then McCoy Tyner Trio, then Bill Evans, then Oscar Peterson, then then George Benson, then these bands would come through and play 6 nights and leave. And I would watch this, and I'd be the guy who would like go on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And if I had a gig, I would come after my gig. And, they just kind of adopted me. They let me in for free. I'd always kind of sit, never took up any room that if there were paying customers. But I got to tell you, there were multiple nights where I was pretty much the only person in that room.
Wow, like, even for those guys, huh? That's
crazy. Last set on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night. I mean, maybe there's 3 or 4 of us in there, 10 of us, maybe just me.
Wow.
Or a third set. You know what I mean? It's like, and I heard a lot of good nights and I heard a lot of bad nights. You know what I mean? I that you can hear. Wow, the Cats. It's not. It was burning last night and it's kind of shaky tonight. Whatever.
But that's interesting that you say that, because I tend to think, I think of those names that you mentioned, and you sort of think of them as like musically infallible, because they're like the.
Well, of course, the difference between a good night and a bad night was once you hear an amazing night,
and
you hear them just
you have a frame of reference. Yeah.
Then you hear them being great. You go, well, that's not as good as. You can tell they're struggling. You can almost see it as much as hear it. Anyways. But the one thing I realized, regardless of a good night or bad night or whatever, those guys were bringing it. The intent, the intensity, and the integrity was never changing. 100%. You're on your instrument. This is your place to be free. This is your place to fly. This is your place where justice exists. The bandstand. It's a form of love. It's a form of protest. It's a form of self, just actualization and awareness. You know what I mean? We talk about, like all these problems in systemic racism and all these things we have in this world and people not understanding each other. The bandstand is the place that all goes away. Yeah. Because there are people there to make music. There's a leader's concept. Everybody's there to support the leader's concept, but also by doing that, they have to be themselves. And what that to me was the biggest lesson of all is if you're going to do this, it's religious. It demands that much faith and that much belief and that much integrity and intent and intention and intensity. And I'm not saying burning, there was a lot of times where they were just barely tipping, whispering, Stan Getz, and Kenny and Albert Daly. I remember Albert Daly and Stan Getz, a duo. You could just like, the music was hanging in the air like smoke does in those black and white movies, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but still that intensity and integrity was there every second.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the biggest lesson of all, because I think some guys, and that's the other problem with practice, is you get into practice and you just kind of forget about that emotional and connection to the music, and then you just think you're going to turn it on when you go to the bandstand. Well, no, it's not one of those things. There's a certain stamina, there's a certain just methodology to, being in that where it's flowing.
Yeah, yeah. I find that, like for me, where I am in my development, those moments are rare, but like sort of chasing those moments are why I keep doing it, because it feels so good when.
And you believe me, but if you would ask Art Blakey or McCoy Tyner or Bill Evans, they would have said the same thing you just said.
Yeah.
Sure. Come on, we have to listen to ourselves every day, all day long. What we can do versus what we can hear and imagine, that, that's actually, it's exponential. The more you play, the more you know, the more you hear, and it humbles you. And that humbling is what enables you to continue on that path. Yeah,
it's like I've been thinking the more I work and the more I get into this stuff, it's like the trajectory is less about like I'm accumulating more information. The trajectory is like my awareness is broadening, and that's changing my music.
Right.
I'm just hearing things I did not hear before because I wasn't open enough to hear them.
Yeah. Nobody's. God, you stay away from anybody who's like satisfied with their playing or thinks they're really badass. Because that's just stupid.
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
How could you?
Right.
Yeah, that's sort of the great and sad part of the musician's journey, is that you're never satisfied, but that sort of appeals to me. You know what I mean?
Doesn't mean you have to beat yourself up over it.
Yeah.
You're as good as you are, and you're 100% committed into making it as great as it can be in that moment. And you've done that. So there's your success. It's just like you are hearing more, and then that's your chase, and one doesn't negate the other. Yeah. Unless you allow it to.
Sure.
And a lot of guys emotionally can't hang with that. I always like to say there's like two people, there's like inside us. There's the one who says, hey, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm doing pretty good, and I'm working hard, what I mean? It's like one of those, that kind of almost justified self-rationalization thing. Mm-hmm. And there's the other one is, God, you suck. You hear what you did there? You just can't, you're horrible. You know what I mean? Get your shit together, right? Whatever. And the key to, I think, a lifetime of success, not that I can do it, is to go to bed with the guy who says you did the best you could, you're really good, you know what I mean? Great shit has happened, you gave it your all. Mm-hmm. And then wake up with the guy who says you suck, you need to get this together.
Yeah.
But if you do the opposite, that's when it leads to destruction, self-destruction. It leads to oftentimes drugs and alcohol. It leads to anger and bitterness.
Yeah.
And actually, strangely, it leads to actually lack of motivation and lack of progress. Because if you beat yourself up after the gig and you get all drunk, or you do a bunch of drugs, or you just get mad at people and fight or whatever, or go, and like watch TV till 4 a.m. to get your mind off it, or whatever you do, then you sleep in too long, and then, you've wasted all that time where you could have been in good shape to take care of the problems you have.
Yeah.
And usually the people, kind of strangely enough, the people who do that stuff, when they wake up, they get all self-justifying and I did the best I fucking could. Fuck you. You know what I mean? I'm pretty good. Then they wake up like that and they do a fucking thing all day, and they repeat that cycle at the gig the next night.
Yeah. Was this like mentality for you something that you would say was always there in terms of that balance, or was there a point where you were?
I'm always fighting that every day of my life.
Yeah.
Every day of my life. I mean, I'm not going to let it beat me. I'm going to try not to. I realize I need to stay positive. And back to about 5 questions ago when we talked about talking to the kids, because I got sidetracked on stylistically where I hear.
Yeah, it's all good.
But I really feel that where I was in that trajectory of that idea was, we're jazz musicians. The whole fundamental concept of jazz musician improvising is to take the situation you have and make something up. Mm-hmm. I mean, whether it's a set of changes, whether it's an instrumentation, whether it's acoustics, whether it's the audience, whatever it is, right? However you're feeling that day, the idea is for you to take all that and make something up. Now, right now, this is the set of changes we got. We're not hanging out together. There are no gigs, or there's gigs that are starting to open up. But let's face it, there are going to be gigs where like the club is only allowed to have a third of their half amount of people it would normally have. They all have to be separated from each other. So let's face it, that's going to be a whole other economic, socio-cultural phenomena, right? What my point is we have to realize, like, you can't play giant steps when everybody else is just playing all of me. I mean, yeah, you can superimpose a little bit and be cool. But if you just play giant steps while everybody's trying to play all of me, you're just missing the point of making music.
Yeah.
So here we have this situation. We got, and I feel like as an educator, I mean, these kids, they probably don't give a shit about me or look up to me or anything. But in case they are, I have a responsibility to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. So, like, I'm telling them, as we end up the semester and they're online, everything's online, and like, I've always been an anti-online guy. I've always saw the internet as a thing to promote my offline world. Just let everybody know where I'm playing or what I'm doing. It was just like my own way of doing my own PR. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't my music. I mean, I didn't even have a YouTube channel. It just had shit on it. It was more like a garbage can than it, oh yeah, here's a video, here's another video. Somebody told me I had to put some videos up of my band because people wanted to hear it before I got a gig, so I begrudgingly had somebody film me play. You know what I mean? It was like, that's kind of the way I was doing it. But boom, March 12th happened. And all of a sudden I realized our life is online.
Totally, yeah.
The nightclub is online. The concert hall is online. The teaching studio is online. The hanging out.
Yeah.
Normally we would just be sitting in a room doing this.
Yeah.
So I told, so my idea was like, hey, we have to maintain our community online. We have to build our community online. We have to use this in a way that's going to keep our creative juices flowing.
Yeah.
Keep us growing.
We have to create the scene.
Right. You have to create a new scene that's never been created before. And maybe it will be these little Zoom concerts. Maybe it will be something we haven't even thought of yet. And that's what I'm trying to get them to think of. It's just, whatever you think, March 12th is not coming back. First of all, it's not going to come back. It never has in the history of man. It's never gone back when a major thing happened like 9/11 or Kennedy was killed or a man on the moon or the Watergate or whatever.
And not to mention the ripples of all those things lasted
it never went back.
Yeah.
It had certain things of that, but it moved on. And so right now, first of all, March 12th wasn't the greatest for performing musicians anyway. So I don't know. I mean, people want to be nostalgic about it. Go ahead. But, I was there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was better than now.
Yeah.
But my point is like, define where we're going. We're artists. Artists' job are to be aware of the past, to shine a light on the future, and and define the path. No, shine a light on the present and define the path into the future. That's what art does. If you accept the responsibility of being an artist, that's your thing. So for us to sit here and go, okay, well, I recognize right now my world is online. It's going to start opening up. What it opens up to, I don't know. Maybe we need to start thinking about where we play this music, how we play this music. Maybe this whole idea of getting on airplanes and going all around the world and playing is kind of weird. Maybe we need to kind of recreate that 1920s regional concept.
Yeah.
What you can drive to within a few hours. That's your that's your professional world now. And then let's face it, most everybody lives within a few million people after about a 5-hour drive. And you don't need that many people to have a vibrant performing music day. And until we open up and until travel becomes trustworthy, and because once we get over just the biology of the thing, of the virus, we've also going to have psychological trauma.
Sure. Yeah.
That we have to get over before we can all get into this. Oh yeah, I'll jump on an airplane and sit next to 300 other people breathing each other's shit, and I mean, that's going to take a while. So meanwhile, whatever happens in this interim is going to define what happens when we get to that point. So that's what I'm trying to tell everybody, but mostly my kids.
Sure. Yeah.
Responsibility for them. And in so doing, I had to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And you're talking to a guy that basically has a built-in knee-jerk reaction to not like the internet. Because I like hanging out with people. And
Sure,
that's the beauty of music. I'd rather have 2 people in front of me than 1,000 people on the internet.
Totally, yeah. And as much as I can enjoy the conversation that we're having now, the rhythm of a conversation is never going to be as good as if we were sitting a couple feet from each other and talking about it. 6 feet, I should be specific, 6 feet. But, man, like my fear with this whole thing, and it could be, kind of unfounded to sort of go in this super negative direction, right? But like we look at all these things that are happening in the world right now, like, people talking about how one of the biggest employing industries in the country, right? Truck drivers, right? They're going to have these self-driving trucks. Things are getting automated. Things are changing. Career paths are changing. Is the artist going to become an automated thing? And like, this concept of like UBI, where people sort of like, gaffed at it maybe like 6 months ago. Now suddenly we're all sort of in that position where we're kind of getting that and sort of needing it as a country. So I just wonder, like, the ripple effect of this whole idea, like will the concept of the artist has to change. I think there's no doubt about that. Like you said, there's no really going back after something like this. This is so major. And this is like, probably one of those big moments of our collective lifetimes to live through. This, oh yeah, the coronavirus, that was a crazy thing. But it's a genuine fear of mine that, like, what is being an artist going to be from now on? We have.
That's good. You see, in that, there's nothing wrong with being negative or fearful. But it's what it is now you have posed a question.
Yeah.
Now you need to answer it.
Yeah.
You need to be the one that defines what that is before inertia takes over, before gravity takes over and decides, or before somebody who doesn't even give a shit does it. That's why, in my opinion, we have to be proactive. And do things that, define what it is to be this person in society, and define also the economic parameters of it, along with the actual working of it. But, I went ahead and did my TV show. Twice a week, I'm entertaining people and I'm playing the guitar, and I'm not really replicating what I would do in a club. So I don't feel like I'm sort of, because the one thing, some of the negativity that I worry about, I'll share with you. One is that people are just jumped on the internet and are giving it away. Just like Napster I don't know if you're old enough to remember Napster.
I remember. Yeah.
Okay. But just like Napster killed selling recordings, it killed it. It killed the record industry. It totally did. I mean, there is a before and after. That's a coronavirus right there.
Yeah. There's definitely a line in the sand that.
You see, like, once music became free and people expected to be able to get it for free, and they already kind of were, because they didn't really realize that when it was played on the radio, people were getting paid for it through advertising. There was an economic model there. So they've been getting it for free for so long, and they'd heard the stories about how the record companies were ripping people off anyways. So they felt justified in taking it for free.
Yeah.
And really now we've got people, those people are 40 and 50 years old, and they have kids, so we don't really stand a chance in that arena anymore. But basically, this is another Napster moment where we've kind of moved on to the internet. Now we're playing for people for free, the same shit we would do in a club within reason. And we're just like doing it. Well, when this is over, why should anybody get in their car, drive a good distance, pay a cover charge, pay as much for one drink as they could get it for a whole bottle or a 6-pack, right? Sit around people they don't know. Maybe the acoustics are good, maybe they're not. Maybe the comforting, the chairs aren't as comfortable as at home in your living room. That's what I'm afraid of, is that we're training people to consume music here. And so when we want to go back to to a way that we love and we are nostalgic for, they're going to reject it.
Yeah.
And so, and to say nothing of the clubs that have been trying to stay open, they're going to have to gouge people to get some of their money back, including us.
Live Nation, did you see that thing they posted already with their new policies? I think they're getting raked over the coals for it, but it's outrageous.
Yeah.
They want artists to assume some of the responsibility of their missing profits, so they want them to take pay cuts. In addition, they want to have the video rights to any performance you have in a Live Nation venue. So in other words, they can film your whole concert, put it on YouTube, monetize it, and it's all theirs. There's nothing you can do about it. And these are the same venues that also take merch cuts. I've done a lot of touring. Not a lot of touring, but I guess for my age, I've been on the road about maybe 3.5 years if you stacked all my tours concurrently. I spent a lot of time on the road, and there's nothing worse than these fucking venues that take this merch cut. 10% of your merch, 15% of your merch. It's like, we're not getting a bar cut, like you're not participating in the cost of our merchandise right here in this very meager amount of money that we're making. So, it's just like, I don't know how it happened in history, but for some reason, music is one of those careers where they're allowed to screw you, and it's not out of you're supposed to take it, under the precipice of paying dues usually, but and luckily people are raking Live Nation over the coals for this, deservedly so, because, as a company, they can't exist without musicians, so to kind of throw musicians under the bus to assume the responsibility is obviously some decision made by some, stockholder in a nice suit in some nice office building. And, but it's just like, it's hard to not get discouraged when the mentality of music is the way it is, and online, yes, you could reach your audience fast, but what you can't explain to people, is how music feels when you're in the room with it. That's something that we're never going to be able to replicate, I think, no matter how hard you try.
No.
And the convenience of it, though, scares me, and it's like when you have someone in the room and you have their attention, you can take them on a journey. When you have someone in their living room watching you, you get maybe a 15-second window before they get distracted by something, and that's a shame because
you see, you just brought up the other fear I have.
Okay.
And it might even be more profound than the first one.
Are you going to leave this thing in terrible shape, Bruce, and bringing up all your fears? This is
No, I don't know. You can always edit it out. The thing I worry about is that through consuming this in this medium, our attention span is so fucked up. Because, it's got slow for a second. Oh, I'll watch this now. I'll watch this now. Well, okay, so now we're going to hopefully encourage people and maybe even expect them to come see us in a concert. Well, then that means they have to sit for like 45 minutes to an hour for a set.
Yeah.
When they're used to like maybe 5 minutes of something before they move on, if you're lucky, 7.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've got that show. My show is an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody watches it. I mean, I wonder, like, maybe of the 500 views, 1,000 views, whatever, I bet there's like 3 people who actually did it from beginning to end.
I usually stay on. I send you a sarcastic comment to let you know. So include me in that list.
But I'm just saying that that's rare.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
It's kind of a cool show because it's a show. It's moving a lot, even though it's, of course, I don't have, it's like a stationary camera.
Yeah.
But my point is like, I do it. I'm listening to something great. I'm watching it, and like I find my hands going over to the mouse. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. It's that Pavlovian training, man, with your phone. It's like you hear a beep and you want to follow it,
Right, but what's going to happen when we go to clubs? Now, granted, clubs were great because there was always not just the band. You're interacting with a waiter or a bartender, a waitress. You're interacting with the other people around you. You're looking around the room at the furnishings. There's lots of other things to keep you interested if the music isn't pulling you in. But I'm still worried about that. People getting back to it and realizing that they're just not comfortable sitting still that long.
Yeah.
And with that, now we have to really rethink what we're doing. Maybe what we should be doing is multiple
1 minute sets.
Yeah. 1 minute, which is another thing. It's another thing I'm doing with my kids. I'm doing Instagram every day. What I do is I have a thing called First Course of the Day.
Yeah.
And I get up and I set my little phone on a tripod, turn it on, pull my guitar out, tune it up first, and then I just pick a song and I play a chorus. Just play over a chorus. And like whatever I get, mistakes and all, I put it out into the world. That again is like, the way I look at it, it's not something I'm going to replicate in my concerts. So I'm not really competing against whatever product I'm going to be trying to sell to the world when I return.
Yeah.
But it keeps me excited, keeps me interested, it keeps me, engaged with people. And frankly, I've got a whole lot of new followers because I'm doing this with consistency, and friends like you are sharing it, and and it's like, wow, I'm getting new fans and building my community. But 1 minute concert, that's what you said. But I'm thinking maybe if like 3 or 4 bands got together and put on their own concert, stop with this working with clubs.
Yeah.
Stop paying somebody else's rent. You know what I mean? If basically, and then now I'm really going to go all crazy on.
No, this is good because I kind of have a feeling I know where you're going.
We're not in the music business.
Yeah.
We're in the real estate business.
Yeah.
We basically pay somebody's rent.
Yeah.
When we go into a club, we're bringing them business to pay their rent. That's what's really happening here. And that equation, that's why we've always been behind the 8 ball. The more people we can bring, the better. But it stopped, like as of the internet, it stopped being the responsibility of the landlord to bring people in.
Totally.
It became the tenants. We're the tenants.
And that's been the case with most of my consistent gigs. It's always been a matter of audience, And if we played a day, I've had a couple gigs where, we have a couple nights a week thing, and some nights are great. If we have one night where it's a slim turnout, then suddenly it's like, oh shit, we're going to lose this thing. And
right.
You're absolutely right. The mentality has totally shifted in that direction.
When I started out, the clubs advertised. There was always an advertisement in the paper. They got you a feature article in the paper. You were coming to town or whatever. Yeah. They were the ones that set up an interview with the radio station. They did that work. Yeah. They did that. That was part of their advanced work with hiring you. As soon as the internet happened, you're on your own, and you're making a percentage of the door, which really means they're going to collect their rent out of it and give you what's left.
Totally.
So my point is, if assuming you agree with me, we're in the real estate business.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a little amendment to that. I tell my students that I'm in the traveling T-shirt sales business. But so,
Yeah. So, anyways, if you somewhat agree with that, and my question to you now is, would you rather be the landlord or the tenant?
of course the landlord. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, then why not?
Yeah.
Why not? No, I'm not saying open up a club yourself, although that's a really good idea, and I have an idea for how I see a modern club being.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to being the, what if you got a great deal on a space? Here's the space. This is what it costs. If you want to record it, it costs this much more. We'll turn the machine on. You get this. You do this. You want food? Bring in a taco truck. If you want, if you want drinks, call a nonprofit and have them put in a bar. We don't have anything to do. We're just giving you a great space to rent. Flat rate, really low price, none of this bullshit. And I don't even care if you have people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But even better, if 3 or 4 bands got together and just found a cool space to use and each did short sets, maybe that's the wave of the future, because then bands are actually helping each other out. Like, my fans will hear you, your fans will hear me, and then the fans will get together and they will cross-pollinate and get to know each other, and and create a groundswell for how this music really got popular in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's some kind of thread of continuity, as different as they are, between things like the punk rock scene and the jazz scene, because being able to do this grassroots sort of DIY thing, I think that's the direction. I mean, I had this idea for like a Patreon funded house concert series where any fans that want to have you, and if you meet the qualifications of be able to have this kind of PA system, rent a mixer with this kind of ends, you take care of the noise ordinance stuff, and we'll play in your backyard, we'll play whatever, and you charge whatever you want at the door. That we charge a flat fee for our performance, and you end up giving an experience that's a lot more intimate than just like you said, paying someone's rent.
Right. Well, with all that stuff, and I hate to say that, and it's funny when I look at the trajectory of what I've done in my life, especially recently, with the red guitar and being more of a solo act, going solo. I got to say that was really timely. I got lucky on this one too, because really I see that is something that, as small as your band can possibly be, that's what you should do, because right now we just don't have enough economy. We don't have, like one extra hotel room, one extra mouth to feed. You are really like a house concert. If you're by yourself, all of a sudden the margins are cool.
Yeah.
You got a trio, it gets a little difficult. Then you need 3 places to sleep, 3 mouths to feed on the road. Not saying it's not doable, but that's going to, right now we need to think kind of like Woody Guthrie.
Mm-hmm.
Might be entering that new Dust Bowl phase.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. It's such a time of kind of flux for everybody. I mean, emotional flux, as you can see, but also, this sort of flux about what our role is going to be. And that's it's a good thing for everybody to think about, apart from just the music stuff we always think about, in terms of just getting good at our instrument. It's just like, what's our societal role going to be? That's something that we tend not to step back and think of things in this sort of, deeper way like that. We tend to be so into the weeds with the music, and that's something that I kind of stress to my students that I always try to catch myself from doing is don't forget about that stuff. It's so easy to just fall into the music and forget that, like, any artist who's been successful in some way has had to think about that. It wasn't by happenstance. All these guys there's so many great players, right? And there's so many great players who maybe don't get the attention they deserve, right? And I would argue that it's because, it's very easy to fall so deep into your art that you forget the externalities, of
We're living in it. Of course, I've been saying this for a long time, so
yeah.
you can really blow this one off. we live in a time that's so ripe for that moment, that 60s moment, for want of a better word, protest and repressive behavior, economic inequality, like religious, problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's why haven't we had, why can't jazz music be like the next Bob Dylan? Why can't, or the next Leonard Cohen, to talk about the problems, or the next Simon and Garfunkel, I mean, those guys were bards. They were James Taylor. They were poets of a time. Why can't musicians? I mean, it seems like the next person of that stature who's going to change the world is not going to be a musician. It looks like it's going to be a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates kind of person, or a politician. And and I got to get going, but I will. This is a call to action. I do think musicians in particular, we're selling ourselves short in some ways, and we're not taking responsibility. In particular, with economic problems, in particular with being improvisational and being able to function under strange circumstances and be creative. Also, in terms of racial mixing, we've all been doing that our whole lives. I mean, most of my heroes are black. I never thought of them that way until somebody made me think of it that way. It was just music. I played all my gigs with black guys, white guys, brown guys, whatever. I mean, it was like when you get on the bandstand, the music's colorblind, but we understand that better than pretty much any other group of people out in the world. And
it's easy to forget that it's not everybody else's experience.
And I think it's time for musicians to start getting involved in politics, especially young ones. I think, also how to be in front of people. And so I would like to see a lot of musicians starting to take up with civic engagement, if not politics, then at least nonprofit community work. Because we know the world needs the answers that we have. Mm-hmm. And it's a good business right now, politics. So that's where all the money is. So I mean, it's sad to say it, but it's true. Yeah. But I think that we have an opportunity to do this as a group because we have the skills and the bandwidth, the understanding, not the energy, the understanding for where we could actually make it better.
Yeah.
And so that would be my final call to action on your show.
And that's a great place for us to end it. I just want to ask you, Bruce, what's the best way for people to support you and your music and what you're doing? I'm going to provide some links, obviously, but you let me know. I know you've got a new My Music Masterclass out.
Right. I got masterclass videos out. I've got the podcast called Guitar Wank with Scott Henderson and Troy McCubbin. I've got Instagram. I got Facebook, although I'm probably maxed out on friends, but you can follow me there. I got a website, bruceforman.com. I got my show, The Red Guitar. I do Skype lessons and Zoom lessons, and I just want to create a big community. And I'm happy to mentor people and to hang and to, I just want to make the world a better place. I'm lucky. I've had a great career. I'm going to still keep playing. But I mean, that call to action wasn't just to everybody else. It was to me too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got you, Bruce. And I will say, as someone, I work as a professional musician, when there was work, and I reached out to Bruce to take some lessons from him, and I found it to be very invaluable, and he gave me a lot of insight. And I feel like anybody, regardless of really, even if you're not someone who plays jazz, I think Bruce has a lot of wisdom to show you just about music in general. So I highly recommend that. And I put my money where my mouth is because I take lessons from Bruce. So
it's very appreciated, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for your time, Bruce.
Man, I loved it.
Thank you, man. Thanks for doing this.
All right, man. Thank you. Maybe we should do a thing where Guitar Wank and your thing get together and we do
that'd be great.
Collaborative one.
That would be great, man. Now.
Finally, it happened to me. I'm unemployed.